All right, so maybe I've been obsessing over Beef Wellington a little bit, but I'm gonna break down the details on how to make the perfect Beef Wellington. Welcome back to the test kitchen here at Certified Angus Beef. So I've been working on all the elements of a Beef Wellington and trying to figure out the best way to get it done, maybe a couple shortcuts, but really just trying to get it perfect. So we'll go over all the elements that really make it what it is. First is the beef tenderloin. You want a really quality piece of beef tenderloin, nice marbleization, because that's where you're gonna get the flavor. It's the predominant flavor of this dish, and the rest of it just add to it. Over that, we've got some Dijon mustard. Sorry, Gordon Ramsay, but I'm using Dijon because I prefer to English mustard. English mustard is maybe just a little bit better than yellow mustard, so we're going Dijon. Next, you have the mushroom duxelles. So I'm using a variety of mushrooms rather than just one kind. I kind of want a deep flavor, so I'm gonna use 3 different kinds of mushrooms with some shallot and thyme, saute that down to make kind of a mushroom pate. That'll be an extra layer on here. Then we have the prosciutto. The reason for the prosciutto is it's a nice salty and flavorful element, but it helps to adhere the duxelle to the tenderloin and makes it a perfect little package. Finally is the puff pastry, which is an important element of this dish. It's gonna rise and create a beautiful flaky crust that makes it rich and delicious. And I wanna go the extra step and put this beautiful lattice on top. That lattice is really what's gonna make it extra impressive and give you that little extra finishing touch to the dish. So let's start with the most important element, the beef tenderloin. Here I've got a couple center cut beef tenderloins, and I chose this because it's the classic cut for this dish. But the other reason is they've got a very consistent shape to them, which means they'll cook really nice and evenly. This one's about 1.5 pounds, so that's kind of the ideal size, about 1.5 pounds to 2 pounds. So this is the one I'm gonna be using for this Wellington.
The first step of this recipe is really a fail-safe for nailing the perfect doneness. After I season my tenderloin with a little salt and pepper, I'm gonna sous vide it. This will ensure the perfect doneness and take some of the variables out of the equation. It also helps to prevent the puff pastry from getting too soggy. To seal this up, I'm gonna use my super cool chambered vacuum sealer, but you could use any home model or just a heavy duty zip top bag with most of the air pressed out. I'll sous vide the roast at 130 degrees Fahrenheit for 2 to 2.5 hours to fully cook it. By pre-cooking the roast, you don't need to worry about hitting the exact doneness when cooking the puff pastry. You're just trying to brown the puff pastry and re-warm that pre-cooked roast. While that cooks, we'll make the mushroom duxelle. First, you'll want to quarter the cremini mushrooms and pulse them in a food processor. Don't puree them though. You want some texture to remain. We'll work in batches so the food processor isn't overcrowded and it cuts everything to the size that we're looking for. Next, we'll remove the woody stems from the shiitake mushrooms. The stems could easily be saved to add to stock or maybe even make a sauce with later. Quarter the shiitakes and pulse the mushrooms to about the same size as the creminis. Add those to your creminis and repeat this process with the oyster mushrooms. Using 3 varieties of mushrooms really adds to the complexity of the duxelle. Garlic and shallots will go into the food processor as well to pulse. Make sure to pulse and don't just run it on high without stopping. Otherwise you'll get a watery puree of alliums, which isn't what we're going for. A rough mince will work just fine for our needs. To make the duxelle, we'll add a little oil to a 12-inch skillet and begin to lightly saute the mushrooms, shallots, and garlic over medium heat. We're not trying to caramelize them, just cook out most of the water. Season with salt, pepper, and fresh thyme. The salt will help to bring out the moisture from the mushrooms, which is what we're trying to cook out in this process. When you pull back on the duxelle with a spatula and you see water sizzling underneath, this means you need to keep cooking it. While you cook your duxelle, some of the mixture may stick to the bottom of the pan, and that's okay. It won't go to waste. Once they have lost a good amount of moisture, deglaze with a little brandy or cognac, making sure to scrape up anything that's stuck to the bottom of the pan. It will evaporate quickly and the duxelle should be just about ready. When you push your duxelle to the side of the pan, you shouldn't see any liquid seeping out. This is a sign that it's good to go. Spread the duxelle on a sheet pan or plate, making sure to flatten into an even layer. This will help it cool quickly and evaporate more moisture. Now place it in the refrigerator, uncovered, until cool. Now that the tenderloin is fully cooked, it's time to give it a sear. You can see that it has lost some moisture in cooking, which is a result of any cooking method. The benefit is that now it's not going to happen inside the puff pastry and make the bottom crust soggy. To ensure a good sear, thoroughly pat it dry with paper towels. Heat a little canola oil over high heat and sear the tenderloin on all sides. This develops a ton of flavor that you'll only get from a good sear. Make sure it's well seared all over and don't forget the ends. Now into the refrigerator with this beautifully seared tenderloin and let it cool completely.
Now all of the elements to my Wellington have been fully chilled, so I'm gonna start layering the Wellington with the prosciutto, duxelle.
We'll actually brush it with a little Dijon first in order to give it a little mustardy tang. Evenly overlap the prosciutto. This will help it hold together while rolling. Spread an even layer of the duxelle across the prosciutto. It should be about 1/8 to 1/4 inch thick. I like to give it a quick roll to measure and make sure that it will totally cover the roast. Now using the plastic wrap to keep it tight, I'll roll the tenderloin, working away from me. Use your fingers to push the roast back into the duxelle while using your thumbs to roll the plastic forward. This will help to ensure it's tight with no air pockets. It's kind of like rolling sushi, except it's a big piece of beef tenderloin. To ensure a good cylindrical shape, I'll pinch the plastic wrap on both ends and roll it away from me. This will ensure a tight wrap and even shape. Refrigerate the roast to help it firm up. This will make it easier to roll in the puff pastry. Generously flour your workspace and roll out the puff pastry. We're targeting about 1/4 inch thick. I'm just using store-bought puff pastry. If you really want to put in the extra work, you can make your own, but I think store-bought works just fine. Estimate the length of the pastry needed by rolling the tenderloin down the puff pastry and cut off any of the excess. I like to cut a little extra off the side so that the ends don't have an excessive amount of dough. Here again, I like to work with plastic wrap. It helps to tighten the puff pastry around the roast. Now that the roast has firmed up nicely in the refrigerator, we'll roll it in the puff pastry. Place the roast on the side of the pastry closest to you with the seam up so that after it's rolled, the seam will be on the bottom of the roast. Using the plastic to help you, just like before, roll the roast away from you in the puff pastry. Make sure to brush the front edge and both ends with egg wash. This will act as a glue to seal it shut. Close up all the ends of the puff pastry with your hands, then roll it in plastic to help keep it tight and refrigerate to ensure that the butter in the puff pastry stays super cold. Rolling tightly in plastic again will help push out any air pockets in there. Flour your work surface once again and use a second piece of puff pastry to make the lattice. Roll out the pastry to about 1/4 inch thick, just the same as before. This step isn't totally necessary, but it really makes for a dramatic presentation. If you're gonna go through all this work, why not go that one extra step? To make the lattice, you're gonna need a special tool, but you can find them at most kitchen supply stores or pretty easily online. All you need to do is hold onto the edge of the dough and press firmly with your lattice cutter to make the incisions. Gently spread the pastry apart. You can also use a paring knife if you need to help separate the pastry in any of the areas. Once it's to the size you need, cut off any excess. The Wellington is chilled, so it's time to give it that final lattice topping. I like to cook it on a sheet pan lined with a silpat or parchment paper. This will help to keep it from sticking to the pan. Coat the Wellington in egg wash in order to adhere the lattice to the exterior of the pastry. Make sure to give the pastry a good coating of egg wash, but you don't need to use so much that it's dripping off. Lay the lattice on top of the pastry and gently apply force with your hands to adhere it to the exterior. Use the sides of your hands and your pinky fingers to help tuck the lattice under the pastry. Take a plastic bench scraper and cut off any of the excess lattice. Finally, give it one more good coating of egg wash to ensure a glossy and beautiful crust. These extra steps really help to enhance the wow factor of the final product. Now bake this in a preheated 425-degree oven for 45 minutes, rotating the roast 180 degrees halfway through cooking. You'll want to remove the roast from the oven when it hits 90 degrees internally and let it rest on a wire rack for about 10 minutes. It will continue to cook another 30 degrees because it's so well insulated in that pastry. The wire rack will help keep the bottom from getting soggy as it rests. Finally, we get to slice into this roast. It's important to use a serrated knife because it'll help keep the crust intact. Now that's a perfect beef Wellington. Look at that interior and that even layer of the mushroom duxelle.
This is really the most important part. Ooh. I get to eat some. Okay. It's so good, it's crunchy. Crispy crust, super rich duxelle. A little salty from the prosciutto, really nicely seasoned. The doneness is perfect. Can't go wrong with Beef Wellington. So good. Thanks for watching. Remember to like and subscribe, and we'll see you next time here in the Certified Angus Beef Test Kitchen.